All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're taking a closer look at the amazing world of the female reproductive system.
It's a topic that's often oversimplified, but it's actually incredibly complex and fascinating, and we're going to unpack all those details today.
Absolutely. We're going to do it in a way that's both accurate and engaging. No dry textbook stuff here.
Exactly. We're going to delve into the anatomy, the hormonal interplay, and really get a feel for how incredible this system truly is.
The source material you shared is a great starting point.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with the anatomy, with the vulva? I mean, it's the most external part of the system, but it doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
Right. And it's important to remember that it's not just one thing. We have the labia majora, the labia minora, all playing crucial roles in protection and sensitivity.
And of course, we can't forget about the clitoris.
Absolutely.
I mean, its role in sexual stimulation is well documented.
Mm-hmm.
But from a purely anatomical perspective, I'm curious, how does its structure actually allow it to carry out that function?
Well, and this is interesting. The clitoris is actually much more extensive than what we see externally. It has internal structures, a network of nerves that extend along the pelvic floor, designed for heightened sensitivity and response to stimulation.
Wow, it's amazing how much we still don't know about our own bodies.
Yeah.
So, moving past the labia, we come to the vagina. I gotta say, the textbook description of it as just a muscular canal doesn't really do it justice.
It really doesn't. No, you have to think about all the things it has to be able to accommodate, from intercourse to childbirth.
It's incredible.
And on top of that, it plays a critical role in maintaining a healthy internal environment. You mentioned the rugae, right? Those folds in the vaginal wall, they're not just there for stretching, they actually increase the surface area, which helps maintain that acidic pH balance.
Which, if I'm remembering correctly from our source material, is really important for protection against infections, right?
Exactly. It's like a self-cleaning oven, but way more important. And this balance can be affected by all sorts of things. Hormones, medications, even the type of soap you use. It all highlights how important it is to understand vaginal health as part of overall well-being.
Okay, so we've got this amazing complex organ, but it doesn't work in isolation. Let's talk about the uterus.
Yeah.
It's often described as pear-shaped, but I have to admit I've never really understood where that pear shape comes in.
Okay, so imagine the uterus like an upside-down pear. So the narrow end, the cervix, is pointing downwards, and the wider part, the body of the uterus, is sitting above.
Ah, that makes so much more sense. And the uterine wall, we know from the source material, has 3 layers, but I always get them mixed up.
That's understandable. The endometrium is the innermost layer, and it's kind of the star of the show when it comes to menstruation and implantation. Think of it as a constantly changing lining responding to your hormones.
So then you've got the myometrium.
The myometrium, yes. The thick, muscular middle layer, it's responsible for those incredible contractions during labor.
That's a pretty important job.
Right.
And then what was it, the parametrium?
You got it.
Yeah.
Parametrium. It's the outer layer, the final layer of defense, keeping everything safe and sound.
So we've got the uterus, but it can't do its job alone.
Okay.
We got to talk about the supporting cast here.
Absolutely. First up, the cervix, that gateway between the vagina and the uterus.
I'll be honest, I used to think the cervix was just there, like a door just opening and closing when needed. But our source material suggests it's a bit more dynamic than that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The cervix changes throughout your cycle, responding to hormones. It becomes softer and more open around ovulation, which allows sperm to pass through.
Wow. I had no idea. It's not passive at all, like I thought.
Not at all. It even produces its own mucus, which, depending on where you are in your cycle, can either help or hinder sperm's journey.
Our bodies are incredible.
They really are.
Okay, what's next on our anatomical tour?
Let's talk about the fallopian tubes. These are the pathways that connect the ovaries to the uterus. And here's a common misconception. Fertilization doesn't happen in the uterus.
Wait, really? I always thought that's where the sperm met the egg.
Nope. The fallopian tubes are where the real action happens. That's the meeting place for the sperm and the egg. And then if fertilization occurs, the fertilized egg travels down to the uterus.
So it's like a rendezvous point.
Exactly. And finally, we get to the ovaries. Now, they often get simplified as just egg holders, but there's so much more than that.
Okay, tell me more.
They are like the hormone factories of the reproductive system, responsible for producing estrogen and progesterone, which are key in regulating the menstrual cycle and influencing everything from mood to metabolism.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. So we've covered the anatomy, and I feel like we've laid the groundwork for understanding how this all works together.
Absolutely. Now let's get into the heart of it. the menstrual cycle.
Okay, so the menstrual cycle. This is where it all comes together, right? Like all those different parts we talked about actually have to work together.
It is really like a beautifully choreographed dance. Hormones are really like the orchestra conductors here.
Yeah, and like you said, with any good dance, timing is everything. Your source mentions all these different phases, which I'll be honest can be a little overwhelming. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the best place to start is what most people consider day one menstruation. It can seem like just a monthly inconvenience, but it's really a key part of the whole cycle.
Right, so it's when the uterine lining sheds.
Yeah.
But what's actually happening with our hormones at that point to make that happen?
So right before menstruation even starts, the hormones estrogen and progesterone, which we know are responsible for thickening that uterine lining, they start to decline. And this decline signals to the body that, okay, a pregnancy didn't happen this time. We don't need this lining anymore.
So it's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. And then as that lining sheds, that's when the follicular phase of the ovarian cycle begins. Estrogen levels start rising again. And that rise stimulates the development of follicles in the ovaries.
Each of those containing an immature egg.
Exactly. And only one of those is actually going to mature and be released during ovulation.
And that's usually around the midpoint of the cycle, right? That's why it's so important to understand your cycle length if you're trying to conceive.
Absolutely. The source mentioned a term I thought was really interesting, Mittelschmerz.
Oh yeah, that pain some women feel during ovulation. Is that normal?
It's actually pretty common, thought to be caused by the egg literally bursting out of the ovary.
That's fascinating and kind of scary.
Yeah. It just shows you how much is going on that we don't even realize.
So the egg is released. Then what happens?
So that brings us to the luteal phase. If that egg is fertilized by a sperm, it travels down the fallopian tube and implants in that uterine lining that's nice and thick thanks to that estrogen. But if fertilization doesn't happen, that egg disintegrates. And the corpus luteum, the structure that housed that developing egg, that starts to break down.
And that breakdown triggers more hormonal shifts,
Yeah,
right?
got it. As that corpus luteum breaks down, progesterone, which had been on the rise after ovulation, starts to decline, and it's actually that decline that triggers menstruation, bringing us all the way back to the beginning.
It's amazing how it's all connected.
It really is.
So we've talked about estrogen and progesterone. What exactly do they do beyond their role in the cycle? I know our source mentions estrogen being involved in female characteristics. What does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a little simplistic, but it does highlight how wide-ranging estrogen's effects are on the body. So it's involved in breast development, body fat distribution, bone health, skin elasticity, even mood regulation, which is why some women experience mood swings during certain points in their cycle.
Makes sense. What about progesterone? We've mostly talked about it in the context of preparing for pregnancy.
Right. Progesterone is sometimes called the calming hormone, and that's a good way to think about it. It kind of counteracts some of those stimulating effects of estrogen. Promotes relaxation sleep. During pregnancy, it helps prevent uterine contractions, and it preps the breasts for milk production.
Wow. It's incredible how much these hormones affect us, even how we feel.
Absolutely. And it's not just during the cycle. Their levels fluctuate across a woman's whole lifespan. Puberty, menopause, beyond, understanding those shifts is crucial for addressing a whole range of health concerns.
Okay, this is all super interesting, but now I'm kind of wondering about the other side of this whole equation.
You mean the male reproductive system?
Exactly.
That's a great point. We've been focusing on the female side, but it really does take two to tango.
So, are we ready to switch gears and take a look?
Let's do it.
So we spent all this time really getting to know the female reproductive system. But like we were just saying, it takes two. What's going on in the male reproductive system that allows it to work in concert with all of this?
That's a great question. It's easy to forget that the male side is just as complex, as fascinating as the female side.
So where do we even start? I mean, I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than...
Well, there is a
yeah?
lot more to it. Why don't we start with the basics? The male reproductive system, it's really all designed to produce and deliver sperm, those male gametes, to the female reproductive system.
Okay, that makes sense. So where is the sperm actually produced? I'm assuming the testes is more than just a silly word.
That's right. The testes are the main players here, and they actually have two main jobs, producing testosterone and producing sperm.
A 2-for-1 deal.
Exactly. And here's something interesting. The testes are actually located outside of the body, in the scrotum.
Why is that? It seems kind of vulnerable.
It does seem counterintuitive. But sperm production actually requires a slightly lower temperature than our normal body temperature.
So it's like a built-in temperature control.
Exactly. And once those sperm are produced in the testes, they mature and are stored in a coiled tube called the epididymis.
Okay, so that's where they hang out until showtime.
You could say that during ejaculation, sperm travel from the epididymis through a long tube called the vas deferens.
The vas deferens, that's what gets cut during a vasectomy, right?
Exactly. It's a surgical procedure that prevents the sperm from being released.
Makes sense. So back to the journey. They're traveling through the vas deferens. What happens next?
As they're traveling, they actually mix with fluids from the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, the bulbourethral glands. This mixture is what we know as semen.
So it's not just the sperm making the journey, it's like a whole entourage.
That's a great way to put it. Those additional fluids provide nutrients, lubrication, everything those sperm need to reach their destination.
Which is, of course, the female reproductive system, which we already know all about.
During intercourse, semen is ejaculated from the penis through the urethra, which runs through the center, and the urethra actually serves a dual purpose. It carries both semen and urine.
Multitasking at its finest.
You got it. It's pretty efficient.
So we've talked about the sperm's journey. What about testosterone? You mentioned it's produced in the testes.
Right. Testosterone is crucial for those male secondary sex characteristics. Facial hair, deeper voice, increased muscle mass.
So kind of like the counterpart to estrogen.
In a way, yes. But testosterone also plays a vital role in sperm production, maintaining a healthy sex drive.
So we've got these two interconnected systems, each with their own complexities, their own functions, working together to make reproduction possible.
It's really amazing when you think about it, and it's a good reminder that understanding both sides of the equation is really important for promoting reproductive health and well-being.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered so much today, from the visible anatomy to those intricate hormonal interactions, and in both the female and the male reproductive systems, it's been a fascinating deep dive. And I hope you've learned something new about these incredible systems that literally make life possible. This has been The Deep Dive signing off.